Hello everyone and welcome to the week 1 of the course Stylized Characters in 3D. My name is Yulia Sokolova and I'll be your instructor for the whole 8 weeks of this class. I'm a character artist working in game development, and at the moment I'm working with several studios creating 2D concepts and 3D models of stylized characters. I'm responsible for the entire visual style development of the characters in our games, and I also make sure that everything fits and corresponds well with each other, making the style and colors in the game look consistent. As you can tell from my works, I'm deeply inspired by Disney, and I had a wonderful experience of working on one of their projects. So I preserved a bit, or maybe not a bit, of Disney style in my works. So together we'll go through the whole process of creating a high poly model in ZBrush, turn it into a low poly in Maya, create UVs, bake and texture maps in Substance Painter, and finally we'll render it in Marmoset, making a beautiful presentation for your portfolio. So this first week will be the most theory-heavy week, but I'll try my best to make the theory organized, useful, and easy to listen to. Honestly speaking, I myself don't like long and boring lections, so I tried my best to make it easy to refer back whenever you need to refresh it in your memory. So let's start. So, characters. Characters are a result of a thinking process. Character design is all about thinking and following the basic principles that make each character unique, interesting, and recognizable. Combining all those principles together helps to achieve the main goal of character design, and once you understand these principles, you will know more about what makes a good or bad character design. So, one of my favorite artists, Bobby Pantilias, once was given a presentation describing the core principles of character design, that I also discovered later in books on character design and found out in the materials and lectures of other character artists and animators, and I want to share some of his images from his blog that you can also find online, and this is what he tells us. So from this quote we can see the 4 core principles of character design, and we're gonna focus on those. Silhouette, shape, proportion, and pose, and we're gonna talk about some more too. So let's start from the first, silhouette. So silhouette is something that only shows the outlines without details. Consider it to be a shadow of your character. Simply by looking at the silhouettes, you know exactly who they are without having to see any detail. You are able to recognize a character from far if they are well designed and use the right shapes and lines. So if you remove all the detail from your character and test it out as a silhouette and it still looks recognizable to you, that is usually a good sign of a strong character design. And when sculpting a character in ZBrush, you can also test the silhouette by changing the material to flat shader. So, flat shader is a default material that has no lights and no shadows, and it shows only the color. So you will actually see something like this when you switch to flat shader. And this way you can see if you're moving the right way. So just by looking at these, you can easily tell who is who, because their silhouettes are easily recognizable, they are original and unique. The next core principle is shape. So a lot of very successful character designs are made up of simple shapes. Each shape you choose has its own meaning. For example, we see round shapes as soft and approachable, and more angular shapes and sharp shapes are dangerous and shady. Shape can really tell a lot about the character because it defines the personality. We can easily define whether the character is good or evil, friendly or aggressive, whether he is young or old, or whether it is something modern and elaborate or antique and primitive. For example, these robots from WALL-E, which clearly separate the future from the past. just by looking at their shapes. It is important to choose the right shape for the personality or story you are trying to create around the character. If you have an extremely friendly character that uses a lot of jagged, harsh lines, the audience may not connect well with the character the way you intended them to. Using the shape variety is also important, whether it is just one big shape or a set of shapes of different size. Always remember to have a large, medium, and small pieces in your character. And the best way to build up your workflow is also based on a principle: start with large, chunky, simple shapes, then add medium details, and finally work on small and minor details. Breaking a concept into simple shapes will help you to understand how to block out your character in 3D, like what primitive to use, what is the size of the character's head and torso comparing to other body parts, and so on. So as you can see here, you can break your concept into shapes, for example in Photoshop, by making a simple draw over of the major forms. It helps to break your character into different pieces and to make it easier to work with. And you can also measure how many heads of your character fit into its height. This will help you to eyeball the proportions of your character. Speaking about proportion, pushing the proportions and exaggerating the length and size of body parts, even with smaller details like fingers, can really help to build personality of your character. You can make them appear weak or strong, agile or clumsy, kind or evil, through emphasizing some features of their physical appearance. It is also important to emphasize the contrast between the shapes. This way we are capturing the unique aspect of the character. For example, a good way to show a strong character is to make his upper torso really large, so that it captures your attention first, while making the limbs quite small, building the contrast. And if you want to show that the character is strong, but not very smart, you can also make his head a lot smaller. So the next concept is the pose. When making characters for games, we don't really think much about the pose or the gesture because we sculpt it in the A pose or T pose. I think no one sculpts in T pose anymore. Anyway, if we want to showcase our work and present it in the portfolio, showing an A pose dummy is not a great idea. That's why we need to keep in mind the importance of the pose and posture. Thinking about the way a character is stood or how it holds itself is another way to tell more about its personality and his story through your sculpt. You can make it look strong, frightened, old, etc. just by changing the stance. It is also important to know about the line of action. So the line of action, you can imagine it as a line that goes through the whole body of the character, following his gesture and distributing his body weight. Even when we are making the concept in A pose, it is good to take a look at his body from the side and make sure that he has a nice curve running through his body. The character might have his chest or his hips thrust forward, or on the contrary, he might be slouching with his back a bit rounded. Either way, this will give him a lot more gesture and he won't look stiff and boring as if he had a stick inside of his spine. And finally, when we'll be posing our characters, we'll refer back to this very important art tip presented here by Steven Silver, and it is actually used by all the cool character artists. So when presenting your character in a pose, try to follow the zigzag lines and create a contrast between the angles of the shoulders, the hips and knees, avoiding parallel lines. This will also help to emphasize the gesture. And speaking about parallel lines, let's discuss some important concepts of character design. So the first one is straight versus curve. If you study appealing characters, you will notice the use of straight lines and curved lines. And you will also notice that the lines are never parallel, unless it is dictated to us by the design itself, for example, if it is something of a hard surface design. Yet the most appealing shapes have alternating curves which create a rhythm through the pose. So if we take a look at the Glenn Keane's drawing that he made for Tangled, we'll notice the use of strides and curves. Aside from the contrast in strides and curves, there is also a contrast in simple and complex sides. Simple outlines suggest the line of action and clarity in direction, while the complex outlines conveys details and information. When they are both side by side, they create an illusion of contrast and volume. Here's another example of straight lines versus curved lines that create a nice contrast in the overall shape and helps your eyes to follow the lines. And here's an example of using the straight versus curves in our concept. As you can see, like every shape has this contrast of straight versus curve, a simple side versus complex side. Nothing here is parallel. And also try to avoid the snowman shapes, the so-called snowman shapes. It is when both of your sides are like bulgy and curvy and it doesn't look good. So the next concept is thick to thin or tapered shapes. This is another example of avoiding parallel lines in the design unless it is necessary and is made on purpose. So tapered shape is simply a shape with one wide side and one narrow side. It helps to direct the viewer's eye and makes the shape more interesting. As you will notice, these two concepts always come side by side. You will always see a combination of straight versus curves and tapered shapes. Like if you look on any concept, there you have it. Curve, simple side, tapered shape, straight, curve, and so on. So the next important thing that you should pay attention when looking at the concept is the line breaks. Those are the places where the line changes its direction, and when translating the concept into 3D, you should try to crease these places more and to make them noticeable. From all the angles, when you rotate your character, they should be visible. And finally, something that will help you to eyeball the proportions of the face is the distance between the four quadrants of the face. The forehead to the eyes to nose, nose to mouth, and mouth to chin. Once you have this right, it will make your character look more like the original one on the concept. As you can see here on this concept from Disney, they're actually marking those important line breaks for the 3D artists so that it will be easier for him to follow. And another thing that I wanted to discuss with you is that sometimes the final work doesn't look exactly like the initial concept. Things might be changed for the sake of appeal. 3D model might look a bit different because some things that you might fake in 2D can't be hidden in 3D. And also some things that look good in 2D might not look as good in 3D. So sometimes some design decisions or concerns require to alter the shapes or proportions just to make the character more appealing but still recognizable. As you can see here, for example, the shape of the eyes looks much more different, but more appealing on the 3D model than on an initial 2D concept. So next I would like to share some materials with you. Maybe you will find it useful and would like to check it out. So here are some books on character design that I found useful, and these are about sculpting in 3D. And the first one, Anatomy for Sculptors, is actually my desktop book. I always keep it open when I sculpt something because it has all the necessary reference of the body, muscles, the head, and everything. And also be sure to check out their Instagram page. They have a lot of free and great materials there. And about the artists, honestly speaking, it is very hard for me to make up a list of my favorite artists because I have like, I don't know, 200 or maybe more of artists that I like, but I've chosen just those I think who also share some useful tips and tricks and materials through their social media. So if you Google them, I think you already know them all, but anyway, you can check out their YouTube channels, their Twitter, and other social media. They have a lot of free and other tutorials on Gumroad, and like everywhere they have useful brushes, materials for ZBrush, a lot of stuff. Just go check them out. And finally, a few words about choosing a concept and finding references for your work. So if you still haven't chose a concept and you're not sure what to do, I would suggest you choose something simple that will be fun to sculpt, that has interesting posture and line flow, and maybe has some interesting outfits that tells a story. So here's a short list of artists that create really cool character designs. Maybe you will find something there. And a few more words about finding references. So every new project I start with gathering a mood board of references. I go to Pinterest, I use a free app called PureRef for gathering a mood board. And if you can't find some, I don't know, the pose that you need, you can always use a mirror to look at your own face, for example, and you can also make a photo of yourself if you can't find the right angle or the right posture. For example, oftentimes I make a photo of my own hands because it will be much faster to make a photo of my hand holding something than looking for exactly the same pose in the internet, because sometimes I don't even know how to ask it in Google in order to find it, so I just save myself a bunch of time. So gather enough anatomy references. I think this one is obvious. Also try to gather cloth and folds references because these might be tricky. What I also do is I gather an inspiration board with the works of other artists if I want to try something new, some new style, or like some details that I like in other artists' works. For example, I don't know, if I'm making a big chunky character with square hands and I want to know how to make big stylized square hands, I will find a bunch of references from Wreck-It Ralph, or I don't know, or Moana, and I will just look how they build the proportion of the hands. And finally, you can check out the photos or the sculptures, the miniatures anime figures, superheroes, comic figures, they always have some great folds and postures. So these might be handy. And the last but not the least, I will also send you a file with all the links to the resources that I'll be using in this course. There you will find some brushes, materials, and all the stuff you need. Go check it out. So let's jump into ZBrush. As you can see, I have a custom interface that is based on Shane Olson's UI that is still available on his website, I believe. I left you the link in the text file, and there you will also find some more links about how to make your own custom UI, because every one of us is using his own tools and his own brushes and settings, so it's always more convenient to adjust the interface the way it is more convenient to you. And I also start the project from a very simple base mesh by Rodeska. You will also find the link on his market. So in production we usually have more complex base meshes. Sometimes, most of the times, they already have the facial features, and they most probably they will already have animation ready topology and maybe even UBs, but in this case I don't want it to have any details that will distract me from the creative process, because I want to show you how I sculpt the faces, how I make them look appealing. So we will work from scratch. So let's plug our concept in the texture menu. By the way, if you want to have your concept as a reference image on a transparent background, you need to have your concept on the black background. This way ZBrush will see it as transparent. And here we can change the size and the opacity, and we can press the Z button to hide the circle menu. Okay, so let's see. First of all, I want to eyeball the proportions. For example, as I see here, my character has quite a big head. Like, if you look at the shoulders, the normal size of the shoulders usually can fit like three heads in the widest part. If you notice that you can't use your move brush or any other brushes, that is because the spotlight projection is on. It is trying to project anything you have plugged in the textures onto your mesh. In our case, it is our concept, and we don't want that, so go to the brush menu, and in the samples you will find the spotlight projection button that you need to turn off. So let's mask the bottom part of our character, and in the masking menu we can blur our mask. I'm using the transpose tool to make the character shorter with the move tool, and I'm also lowering down the intensity of my brushes. Another handy thing is the Move Topology brush. I also have it as a separate topology button in my UI. It helps me to move the polygroups separately from each other without affecting the neighboring shape, and this is very handy. So I'm looking at the widest and the narrowest parts of my character. I'm comparing the head shape and the waistline, making sure that the knees also are in the same place as on the concept. And I think the legs should be a bit more short. If we hold down the control button and open the brushes, here we can change the shape of our mask. I think the knees are a bit too low. Something like that. Okay. The feet are quite narrow. And quite long. So when working on stylized character, we usually tend to make the hands and the feet a bit larger and chunkier, just to make them more visible. I mean, in games, because your character is usually quite small in game, and as you can see from the concept, her feet are kinda squarish. I tend to make the feet a bit larger so that they are visible. And I also want to add some gesture to her pose. Don't forget to use the symmetry, it will save you a bunch of time. You can turn it on and off in the transform menu. I want to push this leg, this bottom part of the leg back, so that it has a curve. Oops. Let's move it back into its place. And continue pushing the leg back. I'm looking for this S-shaped curve in her legs. If we press Ctrl Shift and go into the brushes, we can also choose the shape of the selection. That helps us to isolate some of the elements. So let's hold down Ctrl Shift and click on the elements that we want to hide, and hold down Ctrl and click to mask, and hold down Shift Ctrl and click once again to reveal what we have hidden. Let's rotate the arms and work on these shoulders. To move it into its place. What I also like to do is I like to have the hands, the arms slightly bent at the elbow. It just gives a nice gesture to the whole figure, it looks more natural. And let's add the breast. I'm using the Insert Primitive Mesh. If you press BI, you will find it there. Now let's push them in. And I'm using the Move brush to give them something like a drop-like shape. Always remember to keep an eye on the reference. I always have the reference the anatomical reference opened on my second monitor. There I check out, for example, how the breast muscle is connected to the body, to the shoulder. And now let's add the knees using the same technique with the insert sphere brush. We will add 2 spheres for the knees and then push them back into the leg. And squash them. I don't worry much about the shape at this step, to be honest, because we'll be sculpting right above it anyways. We can change the shape to whatever we want. I will hide the feet for now, and the hands, and the head together with the ears, and let's see, what do we have here? Okay, so what I will do, I will split these parts off as we're not working on them during the week 1. So I will split hidden, and I will duplicate the body in case if I want to get back to it, because I want to merge all these separate pieces together using Dynamesh. So let's set the Dynamesh to a very low resolution, but before I actually push the button, I will subdivide it a couple of times. Click now and let's see what it gives us. Okay, that will do. I always start my work at a very low resolution, and this way it is much easier to control the major changes of the shapes. It's easier to smooth the shapes, to crease them, and to sculpt above. So make sure you work in low as long as you can. Now let's grab the clay build-up brush, set its intensity to about 10 or whatever you like, and let's start sculpting. I'll start with the legs. I usually jump from one part to another, working on the whole body, so this helps me to maintain the same amount of detail all over the body. So here I'm carving the details around the knees, and I add this line break in the center of the knee. I also like to use the MacCut brush to crease the edges of the shapes and to carve the details. It works the same as the Dam Standard brush mixed with pinch brush. So if you like it, I also left you a link in the file. You can download it and try it out. If we hold down Alt while using the brush, we can turn on the opposite action, like if we usually make a cut, this way we will create a peak instead of the valley. So I'm using this to create these creases on the knees. I really like how the MacCut brush pinches the surface when making a cut. Let's smooth it out and work a bit on the back of our character. Put the shoulders in place and fix the area under the arms. Always remember to check your character from all the angles, from upside down, from the top. Here on the inner side of the arms, I need to create a straight line. Remember about what we were talking about, straight versus curves. So here we have a simple side. So let's sculpt this area next to the elbow, making the silhouette straighter. And we also need to remember about the tapered shapes, the one that we have in the top and in the bottom. And also pay attention to where you have the elbows. This is a very common problem especially if you're working without reference, and I will see if you do. Remember that you need to put the elbows on the same line as the belly button. I'm constantly pressing Alt when working with the move brush to create those little bites to fix the shape. Now here we have another line break on the arm from the outer side. This is the complex side, the curved side. And we need to make sure that this line break will be visible from all the angles when we'll be rotating our character. Use the Mag Cut brush to crease this line break and to cut in the elbow area and also around the shoulders. Let's add volume to the shoulder to sculpt the places where it needs more volume. And connect the breast area and also put the clavicles in place. I won't be adding too much detail to the neck because this is another common mistake when the character looks like he has a lot of tension in his neck, like his muscles on the neck are in tension. And if you take a look at the anatomy references, you will notice that people usually don't have these muscles visible on their necks unless they are lifting something heavy or they are screaming or something like that. I want to rotate the feet outwards a bit. This will also add a nice gesture to the pose of our character. It's always nice to have his feet, his toes look outward. So the beginning of the process is always adding details and then washing them away, because it's always better to have everything sculpted as it should be. I mean, from the real life anatomical references, and then we can just smooth out the details that we don't need, especially if our stylized character is very, very simple, without a lot of anatomical details on his body. So now I have these shoulders too round, while on the concept they are much sharper. As you can see, we almost have a square on the top of our character on the concept. So let's get back to the shoulders and crease the upper part so that we have a nice angle here from the front. As you can also notice, I make the top part of the neck much wider than it should be, because it just adds more balance to the stylized character. Remember to dynamesh once in a while once you run out of the resolution, to rearrange your polygons. And put those creases back. As you can see, I'm still working on a very, very low resolution because I'm gathering the volumes, I am adjusting the main shapes. The chest should be a bit broader, maybe. Let's push the back. Add the details of the stomach area, the muscles of the belly. And check your character from all the angles. Check if his chest is not squared, it should be rounded from the bottom view, and the line that goes along the chest and under the breast should be curved and flowing. I also feel like the tummy is a bit too flat, maybe. Don't be afraid to add creases at some places that don't require them usually. You will always be able to smooth them out once you don't need them anymore. I think I need to rotate her legs a bit because her stance on the concept is much wider, and it will be a good idea to put her in this pose from the very beginning. It will also help me to work on the clothes, since her pants are quite wide. And we'll look at the line break on the concept. On the top of the hips, we need to transfer this line break onto our 3D model. And another line break that we have is the ribs area, just under the chest. So as you can see, we have a simple shape on top and a simple shape, a triangle in the bottom. So let's continue pushing and pulling the shapes and defining the body part. Here I'm creasing the chest, the breast, adding some volume and using the clay buildup brush and the mech cut brush to define those shapes, and also the ribs, the rib cage. As you can see, we have a very defined rib cage with the line break on the concept. I'm using the Ctrl-Shift-Alt selection to hide the part of the mesh, to make it easier to reach some places that are hidden, for example, like here, under the arms. This way I can sculpt on the ribs and smooth out some of the part. The same on the back. Right now I have too many line breaks that I don't need in the parts where the ribcage meets the waistline. So I'm trying to fix those, as you can see. Let's also work on the glutes, on the butt. You can turn on the lazy mouse in the stroke menu to make it easier to make straight creases, straight cuts. So sometimes the butts are tricky. It's like you're doing the same every time with every character, and each time it looks different. And as one might think, it won't be visible anyway, it will be hidden beneath the clothes, but The back part of a character is actually very important for the animation. So just spend some time on sculpting a decent butt. Pay attention to those shapes. I'm dynameshing, and I feel like I need a bit more resolution here, or maybe a bit less. I'm still trying to stay as low as possible until I have all the details, all the major big shapes in place before I start adding minor details. Okay, so now it has totally lost its initial form and it looks like absolute mess. But don't worry, we'll fix it sooner or later. I just need to add those creases around the top of the legs. Okay, so maybe I'll add some more volume here on the side, and I need to fix those parts of the legs. Push them in, smooth. So somehow I've lost my symmetry. I will use mirror and weld in the geometry menu to flip the details from the left side onto the right side and sculpt back the volume that I have lost when I was pushing in some of those shapes. And let's keep going. It already looks better from the bottom. Now we just need to keep adding those creases and adding back the details that we've smoothed out. Let's mask this so that we don't ruin anything. Same goes for the arms. We've lost some of those details when we were dynameshing. I'm creasing the sides of the hips to get this line break that we have in the concept. It might be too much of a break right now, but eventually I'll smooth it out. So the legs. Adding back some volume to the tummy. So a good way to reach some tricky parts that are hard to reach, like these places where the leg meets the body, is to select some part of your character and cross-section it, like to isolate it so that you can reach it from the inside. Let's turn on double. We can turn on in the display properties menu so that we can see the inner part of the character. And here, by holding Alt and using the Mac cut brush, we can grease this part. We can pinch the area where the leg goes into the body. This will make your workflow much cleaner and faster. So let's mask these parts of the legs and sculpt back some of the volumes that we've lost. Now the butt looks much better. We still need to work on the shape though. I'm gradually adding a bit more resolution as I'm running out of the polygons, and I'm smoothing and polishing using the functions of the deformation panel. So I keep on sculpting and refining the shapes of the legs. I'm also making sure that I have this nice line flow, this curve running down the ribs to the hips, as I want to make the waistline as thin as we have it on the concept. I'm masking the butt area in order to work on the back side of the leg, which is the simple side, a straight side, opposed to the front part of the leg, which have a curve. And I'm using the clay buildup brush to get back some of the volume, as at the moment the leg looks a bit flat if we take a look at it from the bottom. Now I'm smoothing out all of the brush strokes, making sure that the surface is smooth. And eventually I want to change the material because I feel like my eyes are already a bit tired of the same gray matte. Sometimes you need to look at your model from a different angle and using a different shader. So you will find in the links file some of the shaders that I like to use, and the brush also provides some nice default shaders, like for example this one, the skeleton matte cap. And as you rotate your model, you will see all the imperfections on the surface that we need to smooth out. Don't worry much about those at this step, because it will be much easier to fix this when we will have our model remeshed, when the surface will have less polys and will be less dense. I'm putting back those creases in the backs of the legs and making sure that the back of the leg slots in nicely to the upper part of the leg in the area where we have the back of the knees. Here we have this nice stylized connection, which is a bit simpler than the real one, but still looks good. Working on the knees again, on the kneecaps, adding some meat above the knees, some muscle there. And we can also cross-section the legs to check if the shape is okay, if they have a circle shape when we cross-section, that nothing is flat here. So the process here is more or less the same. We're constantly refining the shapes, adding some details and smoothing out some, playing with the volumes. Here I working a bit more on the anatomy of the stomach area of her belly. I want to have some muscle there, as she looks quite fit on the concept. And the abdominal area on the concept is also defined. That is why I want to have it on my 3 model as well. I want to have a belly button and a vertical line running down the midsection of her abdomen. So I will add just everything I need, and then I will wash away something that I don't need. So the brushes that I use most of the time in my work are the default ones, and the top 4 are the move brush, the smooth brush, clay buildup, and MAC cut, or the damp standard, depending on what I need. All of the rest I don't use much until I start sculpting the clothes or some details. But when I'm sculpting the body, I use only those. I saw some people use just one brush, only the clay buildup brush. And so the process is pretty much the same as sculpting in real life. Some people also use the trim dynamic brush or the H polish brush instead of smooth, in order to get those plain flat areas. So I'm checking the proportions, comparing my sculpt to the concept, and I feel like the shoulders require some more work. Maybe the torso is a bit long. Now the neck is a bit long too. So I continue to fix everything. I'm checking where do I have this line break, considering that the character on the concept is already posed. So now I want to move everything together using the Transpose Master. You can find it in the plugin Transpose Master in the menu on the top. This allows us to move all the subtools that we have like if they were one single mesh. And when you get into this mode, remember to turn on the symmetry because by default it is always off. So I'm masking some areas and I want to move the legs a bit, as now I feel like her hips are too wide. The silhouette still needs some refinement, like this area between the legs, since we've rotated the legs and moved them closer to each other. So the stomach area starts to get this proper shape. And I also want to define the rib cage a bit more. So here we get this nice curve, this hip dip as we call it, that adds some nice gesture to the overall silhouette. And I want to emphasize those by adding some cuts and some creases. Remember to check it from all the angles, especially from the bottom, and compare it to your concept. Now I need to put back some of the details that I've smoothed out. And now we can cross-section those shoulders to work on the parts from the inside, in the area where the arm connects to the body. we can pinch those armpits, getting some nice curves there. And this way the line looks much cleaner. I think I should rotate the arms up a bit so that we have some more distance between the arm and the body. This will help us with the retopology later, as we'll be making the low poly. The area around the shoulder is very important for the animation. As your character will be raising his arms, we will need some additional loops there. So let's clean this up and make sure that the inside part of the hand is straight and the part from the outside has a nice curve and a nice line break. Putting back those shoulders and scapulas. The tricep. Here I'm looking for the clean silhouette with no bumps and no concave places. I've also added a slight crease to the bicep area. Making the torso a bit narrower and making sure that it's not square from the sides. So, let's see, let's take a look at those shoulders. I think I've lost some of this shape when I rotated the arms up, so I need to get this nice triangle shape back. And to do this, I will mask the arms and bend them, rotate them down a little bit, since I've already fixed the area in the armpits, and this way I will get some sharp shoulders back, the same as we have on the concept. And I'm also looking to fix the upper torso from the rib cage, as I want to have a nice contrast between the large shape of the rib cage and the thin waistline. As you can see in the concept, we have a really big contrast of the between the shapes between the rib cage and the waistline. Now the ribs seem to be a little bit low, so I'm sculpting back to get this shape into its place. Let's hide the arms and use the clay buildup brush to add some ribs and to make the waistline thinner. I'm looking for this line break. And creasing it even more. I can always smooth out this area later when I get the shape I'm looking for. Adding the line in the middle of the abdominal area. So the process here is kind of meticulous. It's all about sculpting something and then removing something, adding details back, and then smoothing them out until you get the kind of silhouette you're looking for. Here I'm adding more details to the abdominal area. If you feel like the process is a bit too slow to watch on the video, you can just speed up the video or maybe skip it. Skip a few moments and look forward to see what have changed. Because the changes I'm making here are really small, but important for the overall silhouette that I'm looking for. People usually tend to skip such parts in the process videos, and what happens is you start watching how a person starts sculpting from really simple shapes, and then all of a sudden he already has the character body with all the features and all the proportions into place and clean silhouette, and you're wondering like, where is this moment when something rough and something simple starts to look good. And I always try to notice this kind of steps in my own process. So I thought that it might be useful for you if you just want to watch it from the beginning to the end. And you can always just speed up the video if it's too long, but eventually you will see me doing everything in this video. Now I'm just cleaning up the whole silhouette. I'm looking for straight lines and flowing rounded curves. I'm constantly comparing it to my concept. Now I feel like the feet are a bit off. I know that I don't need them to be in place just right now, but they keep breaking the silhouette, so I just want them to be where they should be. I was wondering if I should add some music maybe to the background, but I thought that it would be better if you just turn on your own music if you feel like it's kind of boring to watch. Because really, from from here and further, the process will be all the same. I'll be using the move brush to adjust the silhouette. I'll be using the Mac cut brush to add those cuts and creases where I want the shapes to have line breaks, where I want to show some muscles and bones. And I'll be using the clay build-up brush to put back the volume. Here I'm adding a cut right across the abdominal area, as I want to emphasize the thinness of the waistline. I want to make it really thin here, so that the line break would be visible on our 3D model. And here I'm also looking for this nice line break in the top part of the leg. Putting back those feet into their place. And now I just keep cleaning up all the cuts, all the creases that we have. I'm smoothing it and using the mark cut brush. Also pay attention to this line that goes along the bottom part of the breast. Notice how straight it should be. And here's the flat shader that I was talking about earlier that helps you to check the silhouette. But now I just want to switch to another material to check how it looks. And I'm looking for something that will show me if I still have some concave areas that I want to fix by adding volume with the move brush or the clay buildup brush. Like here, the ribs seem a little bit flat, a little bit square from the side view. I'm defining the elbow. So here I'm putting back those creases to the bicep, and I'm creating this nice transition from the upper part of the arm to the lower part of the arm, so that those parts plug into each other nicely like the pieces of the puzzle. Let's clean those shoulders and clavicles. And notice from the side view that we have these line break in the bicep area from the front and a bit in the tricep area in the back, from the back of the hand. If you find it hard for you to sculpt in this resolution, if your model is too bumpy and the surface is not smooth enough, you can always lower it down in the Dynamesh settings and work in lower resolution, focusing on the major shapes. And you can also use this smooth stronger brush that you can find in the default brushes if you press B/S keys on your keyboard. But I guess at this step you're already making only minor changes and refinements. But if you want to make some big changes in the overall shapes, in the overall silhouette, it would be easier to duplicate your mesh and use the Z remesher to remesh the whole model. Then you can project the details from the original mesh, from the Dynamesh copy, on your remeshed model and just work on the lower subdivision. And we'll be doing this later in this course too, but as for now, I'm just working on my Dynameshed model, adding details and smoothing out. Okay, so I think that is fine for now. Let's stop here and see what we've ended up with this week. So feel free to define a comfortable amount of resolution that you're working on and comfortable amount of details. The goal is to pay more attention to the silhouette at this step. So try to focus on the main big shapes. Compare your model to the concept and make sure that you've nailed the height of your character, the size of his head, the size and the shape of his upper torso, how wide the shoulders are, how wide is the waistline, and how wide are the hips. Also, check out how long or how short are his legs. Check the position of the knees comparing to the concept. And see how thick are the ankles. Pay attention to the widest part of the legs and the thinnest. And also And also pay attention to the line breaks that are happening. Then pay attention to the shape of the arms, whether they have a simple side and the complex side, the straight side versus curved side. Make sure that all the shapes are tapered, that there are no parallel lines and no snowman shapes. Then look at your model from the side and check out the legs. The front side of the leg usually have this nice S-shaped curve running from the top to the bottom of the leg. And then look at the back side of the leg, the top part of which is usually straight, flat and simple, opposing to the front side of the leg. And it rounds down to the knee. And then we can usually see this nice line break in the calf area of the back side of the leg. Check out the overall pose of your character and make sure that he has this nice gesture. Maybe he is thrusted forward or slouching back a bit, depending on the concept that you have. Then look at your character from the bottom to make sure that he is not flat and not square in the rib cage. Look at his chest, at the line of his chest. It should be rounded, and the rib cage should be rounded too. There should be a nice line running along the bottom side of the breast. Then you can check the overall silhouette using the flat color shader that you can find here, and make sure that everything is balanced, that everything looks nicely at this step. All the major shapes and all the major breaks should be there. So if you're feeling that the surface is too bumpy, you can lower the resolution down in the Dynamesh settings and smooth it out, and then just sculpt back the details that we were making with the MacCut brush. So find a comfortable level of detail at this step. Don't worry much if this week you will do less than we have done in this video, because the next week's video will be mostly about sculpting hands and feet and refining the body. So you will have some more time to clean up the major shapes and to add some minor details. And that's all for now. So your home assignment for this week is to listen to the theory, to find a good concept that is simple enough, that follows the core principles of character design in terms of lines and shapes, and start building your character, paying your attention mostly to the silhouette and to the major shapes. That's all for now. Thank you very much for watching and see you next week.